The year is 2002, and things are downright disastrous. Eminem, Harry Potter, American nationalism, it's nothing short of sinister. There are exactly 3 subjects people are talking about in 2002. George Bush, Avril Lavigne, and Super Mario Sunshine. This sun-soaked sequel to Super Mario 64 hit the scene with enough verve, flair, and personality that nobody really cared that it wasn't quite finished. Cataquacks are the talk of the town, Chucksters are the salts of the earth, and Bowser Jr.'s existence is deeply threatening to fans of the Koopalings. But you probably know all that. Or maybe not, I don't know. I'm trying not to do the XKCD meme. But if you'll equip your turbo nozzles and jop over to Sirena Beach with me, I'd like to peruse its first mission. The Manta Storm, in which Mario goes toe-to-fin with a ray. Not a ray of light, mind you, because this is a shallow shadow slipping across surfaces and subdividing when sprayed. The sort of thing that screams, check out the kind of shit this new game console can pull off. This boss is a strange, compelling, and distinct thing. I'm not sure there's anything quite like it. It makes something unique of the environmental space. The ethereal elasmobranch in question has achieved infamy for a handful of reasons. Not merely because it's one of those things whose seat in fandom memory held it on an exaggerated plane of both difficulty and scariness, and not merely because of that clip that visualizes how the game renders it. It'd never be that simple. As you may have heard, its appearance and its association with the vanishing of a hotel has led fans to connote it with a passage from the end of The Shining, and to be honest, it's so specific that the fact that it's an homage is just like undeniable. Like that thing about dry bones supposedly being named after a Bible passage, I've never found that theory especially convincing. Like maybe Shy Guy was named after this short film from the 40s. Maybe Cheap Cheap was named after The Room. But there's overwhelming, indisputable evidence that this boss is an intentional reference to The Shining, which is a pretty wild pull considering that that passage didn't even make it into the movie. On the opposite end, a boss from Splatoon pays deliberate homage to this one. I was advised of this by my mutual Tumblr user Wayslide Cool, follow her immediately, but neither of these things is what's lodged this slimy little silhouette in my memory. No, the thing about this boss that's casting its sinister shadow on my heart is, well, what the fuck is this thing called? And now I'm sure that half of you are thinking, well, Indigo, didn't you already ask this question about a different rando Mario boss a year and a half ago? And the other half of you are saying, I literally know what this boss is named. What is the purpose of this question? And probably 20% of you are saying both of those things. It's cool that my viewership goes above 100%, by the way. That's 1% for every Shine Sprite. Anyway, to answer the left half, yes, and this is going in a similar yet distinct direction. I think it's worth it. And to the right half, well, I would like to ask you, that name that you're thinking right now, where did you get it? How do you know it? How much do you trust it? Would you kill for it? The gist is that no name is actually used within the game. The mission is called the Manta Storm, and the brief monologue that precedes the fight, despite some flavorful rhetoric, has none of the telltale signs of proper nouns, such as, shit, what's it called? The thing where letters are big? So I'm now going to lay out a loose timeline of the Mario Wiki's struggle to pin a name on the Manta. And let the record show I am aware that the wiki is called Super Mario Wiki, however, I call it Mario Wiki as a matter of habit because that's the URL. And no, the irony is not lost on me. Like when I was a kid, I was thinking of it as mariowiki.com. This has been my habit since I was like 9 years old, and at this point I am doing it on purpose. I suspect that the website is unlikely to take particular offense to this misnomer on account of being inanimate. Moving on, the year is now 2006. The only 3 things people are talking about are George Bush, Avril Lavigne, and the Manta boss from Super Mario Sunshine, whose Mario Wiki page went up in April of that year under the title of Manta, this being about a month before there was a page for Mario 64's Manta, that is. Here's the first version of the page. In Super Mario Sunshine, the Manta attacks and spreads the dirt around Isle Delfino. That's not the only place the Manta shows its face in history. This squid-like thing is almost the same as a squid. What? What does that mean? Setting aside the redundancy, what is squid-like about this Manta? The only thing that is different is that it can live on land and does shock people who touch it. Usually, it does lots of trouble to residents living in the Mushroom Kingdom, so Mario is called to take them out. Just watch out for the tentacles. They can squirt ink and send volts through you. recommend not touching it. What boss is this in reference to? Because it is not this fucking Manta. It was not long before the page was retitled Manta Storm. That is assuming that the boss's name is the name of the mission. So within a month of documentation, we already have 2 names for the fucking thing. Now in terms of calling it Manta, there were 4 separate licensed game guides for Super Mario Sunshine. For some reason, 3 out of 4 referred to it only as Manta, the 4th, the Manta Storm. Now, there are a couple iffy things going on here. For one, these guides are spewed by third parties, so it's impossible to know which nomens have been provided by the game's publisher and which have been pulled out of a hat to fill a blank space. Like, if I was writing a guide and I did not have a name for this boss, I would default to Manta too. Actually, no, to be honest, I'd probably come up with something sexy. Like, I'd call it Mantithesis, or maybe the Devil Glider. But for another, print game guides are kind of infamous for just being straight up wrong sometimes. In terms of calling it Manta Storm, well, once again, it is the name of the mission, but nowhere else in the game is a mission title commensurate with a boss's name. Ah, the timeless boss characters of Super Mario Sunshine. Petey Piranha Strikes Back, the boss of Tricky Ruins, and Ely Mouth's dentist. God, if that's what the dentist's teeth look like, I'd hate to see Ely Mouth himself. The long and short of it is that there's simply no reason to assume that a title describing the events of a level is also on the government ID of any of that level's characters. There was a small amount of debate at the time over Manta Storm versus Manta, but the bell was really rung in summer of that year when a third name entered the mix. At that point, Mario Golf Toadstool Tour had been on the scene for 3 years. But a connection to Mario Sunshine was pointed out by an editor with the handle Tyranno128. That Tea Time title has a little Easter egg where its scoreboard name drops characters from other Mario titles and Nintendo games in general, and a lot of these names come from Super Mario Sunshine. Understandably, considering it was one of the only 3 things people were talking about in 2003. And one of the monikers gracing that leaderboard was Phantamanta. And like, be so real with me, there's absolutely nobody else that could be referring to, right? Like, I somehow don't think that's supposed to be alluding to Tap Tap the Red Nose, although as later editor Miley Cyrus Solja bravely pointed out, it is unknown how they can possibly play golf since they're only silhouettes. So anyway, the page starts to make reference to that name in mid-2006. In Mario Golf Toadstool Tour, a name on the scoreboards is Manta, making most Mario fans call him Manta. Either name is correct. That is so authoritative. What are you basing that on? And you might now be thinking, okay, so case closed, right? The boss's name is Phantamanta. And indeed, in December of 2006, the article's title became Phantamanta. But of course, if that were the end of it, there'd be nothing to make a video about. Because see, the argument in favor of calling it Phantamanta goes, the name Phantamanta appears in a Nintendo-published game, and it is indisputably reasonable to infer that that name alludes to this boss. As for the arguments against, 1. Toadstool Tour, like every other Mario Golf title without exception, was developed by Camelot Software Planning. Can a third-party dev, or its localizers for that matter, be reasonably assumed to have titling authority over the characters of an in-house game? Like, what if the new fucking Fortune Street title decided to rename Wario Count Crispus Von Fuck? Does everybody have to adopt it immediately? 2. Do we have any reason to take as a given that Nintendo would have provided Camelot with a list of official names of Super Mario Sunshine characters? 3. Can we say for sure that Phantamanta here is intended to signify the literal official name of that briny phantasm? Or does it remain possible that this is a nickname intended to call that boss to mind? Like, would that one Sammer guy force us to only refer to Fawful as Mustard of Doom? 4. As pointed out by Mario Wiki user Link the Lefty much later in 2019, what if there's a plain error at play here? The same scoreboards have the name Toadster, which the Toadstool Tour page claims could be an allusion to a forgotten comic character, but which Link the Lefty maintains is an erroneous epithet for Toadsworth. But maybe you can hand wave all 4 of those. Hell, I looked up the localization teams for both games, and there are 2 names in common. Maybe that's good enough for you. But more damning than any of the first 4 counterpoints is 5, which is plain and simple, this isn't good enough. If a character appears in one game unnamed and a separate game has a cameo of a name that seems to refer to that character without making any more detailed reference, is that actually good enough to be a source? Even speaking as someone who agrees that the cameo name Phantamanta is undeniably making reference to that boss, I still have to concede that this is not up to snuff, like methodologically. Despite this, Phantamanta remained the title of the article. Let's fast forward some more. Various edits ensue. Lots of people really want you to know that the boss is difficult. Across years, nobody can seem to agree on what color the boss is. Here's a variant of the page that I really like. It possesses the uncanny ability to project itself over any surface of varying elevations instantaneously, much like a shadow. This is why I love wikis so much. Like, I'm not the first person to point this out, but I think, you know, you get a decent amount of people who think that, like, writing with, like, a formal register or with an academic register just amounts to like doing the things that you would do to pad the word count of an essay in high school. Like, you don't say can, you say possesses the ability to. You don't say resembles, you say bears a striking resemblance to. You don't say because, you say due to the fact that. You get what I'm saying? Another edit I really enjoy. Phantamanta is very possibly a reference to The Shining, a horror novel / film, which in itself is very disturbing. But most relevant to our misadventure is the extremely protracted debate over the name. At times the title says one thing and the page body says another, as a very slow three-way tug of war is fought between the respective heralds of the three mantas of Storm, Phanta, and Neither. And to be clear, this was also the case for other Mario Sunshine characters. The sludgy piranha plant mini-bosses that are currently called Proto-Piranha, that's another scoreboard name for the record, have also been known to the wiki as Gatekeeper and Polluted Piranha Plant and Piranha Plant in the Generator. That's terrifying. That is a genuinely disturbing name. I read that and I get chills. It's like a cold wind creeping through a boarded up window. I become acutely aware that something is deeply wrong. And don't even get me started on this wet little freak. For years, this nasty thing was called Swoopin' Stew, implying a relation to the Strollin' Stew enemy and its other variants, to which these blobs have only the barest and vaguest resemblance, all owed to what seems to have been a misprint in one of the strategy guides. Also, for the record, I am obsessed with this image caption. Me when my body is filled with goop. Gooble was another name featured in the scoreboards of Toadstool Tour, and in 2015, the article's title was changed from Swoopin' Stew to Gooble, although not without controversy, considering that given an abstract pool of names and characters, it's a lot easier to decisively draw a line from Phantamanta to this thing than from Gooble to that thing, particularly coming from a game where goop is the thesis. And indeed, it was changed back and forth a few times over the following years. For most of the 2010s, the boss's article remained Phantamanta, but a few developments ensued. Flash forward to 2018. Nobody is talking about George Bush or Avril Lavigne, but there was evidently something to say about Super Mario Sunshine, considering that was the year that the Super Mario Bros. Encyclopedia finally hit Anglophone shelves 3 years after its original Japan release. Now, depending on how in the know you are, this book might be a punchline in itself. Like, I could have titled this video something like Me When I'm a Disaster and flashed a still image of this book for 5 seconds, and there would be an audience for that. The buzz in the fandom that anticipated this particular grimoire came about because of its mission statement to rattle through a set of major Mario titles and definitively outline the names and blurbs of every character, item, location, enemy, and just about everything else. This was poised to be a pretty big deal in terms of record keeping in the English-speaking Mario fandom. It was basically going to be an official statement ironing out every question mark and disambiguating every contradiction. And take a look at that. Phantamanta, Polluted Piranha, and Gooble. For the record, that's 2 Toadstool Tour names and 1 guidebook name. Now, surely this is the one that puts everything to rest, right? But no, of course it doesn't. Because unfortunately, although the 8-bit page count is thoroughly pleasing, the primary claim to fame for the English translation of this wayward spellbook is that it happened to borrow freely and loosely from MarioWiki. In other words, this book did not represent the laying to rest of ambiguous names. It represented a regurgitation of the same names that the Anglophone fandom had been putting up with for years. Oh, sorry, you were hoping that all those little weirdo freaks from the Mario Land games would finally get official English names and put an end to the 3 centuries we've spent referring to them by transliterated Japanese names? Well, fuck you. You're getting the same names you settled on. That'll teach you to want things. All this and more comes from a thread on the wiki's official Twitter, ripping the book to shreds on its release date. Perhaps the most infamous misstep is Luma Comet. The Galaxy character now referred to as Comet Luma was for a few years called Luma Comet on the wiki because it'd been given an official name in French but not English. That regurgitation is of such distinct specificity that there is absolutely no denying that this shit was just haphazardly copied from the wiki. Now, this is often reported as plagiarism, and to be honest, I don't know that that's really the right word. Like, we're talking about the fallacious repetition of names in a manner indicative of a lack of rigor. That's a lot of things, but plagiarism isn't really one of them. The guilty translator's name is known. He did essentially admit to the deed on Twitter, but in a way that suggests that he didn't even know that his actions had represented any misdeed or inconvenience. Like, he was just like, yeah, that's what I did, teehee. A lot of blame has been heaped onto this guy, probably an undue amount, if I'm being honest. What nobody ever seems to bring up is the fact that this seemingly freelance translator guy was hired to translate a guidebook into English and was not told what the pertinent English names were. Like, Nintendo put this guy in a position where using a wiki was probably the only thing he could do. But irrespective of semantics, this of course represented a breakdown of the book's credibility, not to mention the risk of what XKCD, which I swear will not get a third mention in this video, cleverly termed cytogenesis, where a wiki plays host to a sourceless claim, an external source parrots that claim, and the wiki then attaches that incestuous source to the original claim. It's a particularly nefarious sort of smoke and mirrors. So a proposal passed with substantial agreement in favor of banning the book as a source. And you know, despite my minor gripes with Mario Wiki, which are largely transferable to like every other wiki out there, this is one of those things that highlight how it's really in a league of its own. Like, this is a practically utopian arrangement. How many other wikis have this measured of a democracy? How many allow people to be heard in such a meaningful manner? So the point is, the encyclopedia has given us nothing. Early the following year, Super Smash Bros. Finally got its first real character. The first fighter in franchise history where I was like, okay, finally they stopped fucking around and made a good decision. If you have clicked this video and stuck with it this long, then I think there's probably a very good chance that you know what Palutena's guidance refers to, you absolute nerd. But if not, it's basically a Kid Icarus themed Easter egg that plays a bit of unique dialogue for each character, except the season pass ones, of course, meaning that your favorite apoplectic angiosperm just barely made the cut. Its dialogue involves a lengthy list of piranha plant variations, among which is dropped the name Proto-Piranha, which the eagle-eyed and elephant-memoried will recollect as a name hitherto exclusive to the scoreboards, lending apparent credence to Toadstool Tour as a nominal vector. Not long thereafter, the aforementioned Link the Lefty briefly retitled the article of this fugacious filter feeder Manta open bracket Super Mario Sunshine close bracket, and this it remained for one day before being reverted to Phantamanta, although its own body continued to largely refer to it only as Manta, as did other pages on the site. My understanding is that the logic for having the title differ from the article's body is to the effect of, this is what the character is named now, but as long as we're discussing games that predate that name change, we'll use the old name. You can observe this exact thing happening in the pages for Swoop and Princess Peach, among others. And before you know it, it's 2020. George Bush is long gone, Avril Lavigne has been absorbed into the monolith, and Super Mario Sunshine has just begun to transform into a language. As a matter of fact, 2020 has gone down in history as the year where nothing of particular significance happened, except of course for Super Mario 3D All-Stars, the game compilation which everybody loved and absolutely nobody found fault with. Notoriously, the compilation's only real bonus feature was the inclusion of the soundtrack, and deep inside of that auditory ossuary, past a mountain of steam-leaking pipes, there lies a certain familiar threnody. Yes, this is the theme of our boss, the mysterious Manta, and it here appears under the track title Phantamanta. Note, if you will, that this marks the first time across these entire 18 years that that name has been directly correlated with that character in the bounds of a single piece of software. For the record, Proto-Piranha also appears. This fact has no immediate effect whatsoever. It is invoked in a debate on the talk page, but that's the extent extent of it. And if you'll permit me to toss in my 2 blue coins, I cannot help but wonder about this. Because you gotta admit, especially given this release's slapdash reputation, there is a non-zero chance that that name assignment was, let's call it, exogenic. Like, the name Phantamanta had been on the wiki and on YouTube and everywhere else for over a decade at that point. It had basically already won the name debate and everybody had accepted it outside the body of the wiki page. It'd be hard not to take notice of that, and consequently I think we have to consider it a genuine possibility that whoever gave this track its English name was basing it, not even necessarily consciously, on the fact that everyone was already externally calling the character Phantamanta. The way I see it, there are 3 possibilities with any like genuine chance of being true. Possibility 1, Phantamanta was always the name used internally at Nintendo of America. It didn't make it into the text of Super Mario Sunshine, but was provided directly among other names to the Toadstool tour team, and nothing has changed about Nintendo's internal conception of this character. Possibility 2, this boss was not named in Sunshine's development, but the Toadstool tour localizers were permitted or even requested to choose a name for the character and debut it on the scoreboard, after which the name was formally adopted. Possibility 3, during Sunshine's development, this boss was either unnamed or referred to as some name that was not Phantamanta, but was never meaningfully made public. Toadstool Tour's development team invented the name Phantamanta either to volunteer it as a name for the boss or to signify a handle that would make players think of the boss and like differentiate it from a generic Manta. And it was integrated in such a small way that we can't even guarantee that Nintendo proper even knew or cared that this name was there. Wiki users took this as the name of the boss, even though it may have had nothing to do with the original developer intention, and as a result, the name became so universal in the Phantamanta discourse that the localization team for 3D All-Stars became aware of it, didn't look too closely into it, saw no reason to assume the name was anything other than the proper official and timeless name, and just ran with it. And of course, as is necessitated by the frame of this speculation, all 3 of these possibilities produce the same result. They all look identical from our perspective. We wouldn't know. It's not like, say, the Mario Encyclopedia, where a monstrous shambling heap of evidence tells us that it is an unreliable source. You can only prohibit confirmed cytogenesis, not conjectural. But what difference does it make anyway? The end result is that right now, for better or worse, Phantamanta is the official name. Its origin doesn't make a difference. And then it's 2024. For a couple years now, there's been a section on Nintendo.com called Mario Portal. Nothing to do with that one fan game. Mario Portal includes pages on a host of games with exhaustive lists of their enemies, among other information. And to be honest, I'm not sure I follow the purpose. Nintendo's website is very much geared toward like advertising to small children, and I'm not really clear on how this bare bones documentation of Bird is going to facilitate that. Like, if I'm somebody that's never played Super Mario Land 2, this JPEG is going to mean nothing to me. It's certainly not advertising. Why the fuck should I be enticed by some screeching beast of the heavens? And if I'm somebody that cares enough about the Mario series that I do take an interest in Bird and Kyotonbo and the Jason Voorhees Goomba, then this is still nothing to me because, like, there's no details for miles. And since I'm enough of a fan to care, I'm certainly enough of a fan to know where to look to get actual information. This is not an ad and it's not a resource. So what the hell is it? Regardless, it does represent an official stance on the names of various enemies. We've never heard that one before, right? But look at that. The Gooble diehards are finally exonerated. Their life sentences are waived, and as they're walked out of the oubliette, they come face to face with the system that failed them, the lawyers and the magistrates that slandered them, knowing that nothing can truly atone for the way they've been wronged. Oh hey, it's Proto Piranha! So we can say with confidence that this portal is not just copying names directly from the 2018 encyclopedia, or at least not all of them. In summer of that year, because of course this story would end in summer, isn't that poetic? A new proposal was put forward on MarioWiki by user Nintendo101, suggesting that the Toadstool tour names be reinstated across the board. Nintendo 101's proposal summarizes much of the history of these names on MarioWiki. Apparently at one point the name Huge Red Electro Koopa was adopted from a guidebook as the name for a mini-boss that is literally green. scene, and then points out that the Mario Portal names correlate precisely with the Toadstool Tour names. Now, of course, once again, to toss my opinion into the salad, I think it's extremely difficult to say with certainty that these names made it onto the portal with 100% independence from their appearances on mariowiki, in the encyclopedia, and in other sources. But like I said in the last section, that doesn't change the fact that these are the official names now, or as close as we're gonna get anyway. Nintendo 101, all in all, makes a strong case for the fact that the Toadstool Tour names are now substantiated in a way that they weren't necessarily back in 2006, and the proposal passed unanimously. Its will was carried out almost instantly. The title of the page was already Phantamanta, but the body now changed to represent that, along with the text of other pages, and it has remained that way ever since, meaning that the contents of the Mario Portal have been reflected on the Mario Wiki page. Yes, every Sunshine, enemy, and boss page on the Mario Wiki now has the exact same title that's provided on the Mario Portal. Yeah, so the Mario Portal doesn't call it Phantamanta, it just says Manta. I checked the web archive, and as far as I can tell, there are no captures in which it says Phantamanta. Per the evidence we have, there is no point at which it has said Phantamanta. This is pretty funny, all things considered. Like, the thing that directly leads a certain name to be fully adopted without caveat does not include that name. Like, obviously, for one, the rationale here was that the correlation between the Mario Portal's names and those of the Mario Golf scoreboard lends credence to the latter, and for another, the 3D All-Stars soundtrack thing should probably have been enough on its own. But it is really, really funny to me that the source that finally declared a victor in this name debate, at least for the time being, did not even mention the winning name. That's sensational. I love it, and I'm obsessed. Phantamanta is substantiated in recent memory, yet the most recent document from Nintendo has just termed the boss Manta. And this name has been up for at least 3 years on a website where other names have undergone revisions in that time, meaning that names probably weren't just tossed up and then forgotten about. At the time of writing, the Phantamanta page still says Phantamanta, originally known as the Manta, and the page does not have any citation of Mario Portal, something which the Google article does have, and obviously a website is not going to override what has literally been stated in a game, but I do find it notable that the Portal page hasn't said Phantamanta. Like, on a section that is maintained and updated, every opportunity has been there to make it say Phantamanta. So why not? Is it genuinely an uncaught mistake? Does it signify that the 3D All-Stars track title was an aberration? Or hell, what if this name has been influenced by the wiki? Returning to the 3 possibilities I put forward for why the name Phantamanta appears in 3D All-Stars, if either of the first 2 is correct, that implies that this website is mistaken and has been consistently mistaken for a few years now. If the third possibility is correct, that implies that this website is attempting to set the record straight, maybe. The portal also confirms the name Strollin' Stew, a name that was likewise absent from the game proper, but which appeared in the Prima game guide, implying that that guide's writers likely were provided names, or something resembling the correct names anyway, from the get-go, and note also that that is one of the guides that just says Manta. So Phantamanta has won the throne, yet the legitimacy of its claim seems more nebulous than ever before. Hey, at least we know for sure that Manta Storm isn't the right name. As much as I love this story, there's very little by way of a conclusion to be drawn. It is strange and confusing and contradictory, and really it's just a microcosm of the Mario franchise's really idiosyncratic relationship to its fan base and its record keeping, both official and otherwise. Like, on one hand, this seems to keep happening on the Mario Wiki. Like, there was a whole debate over whether Chuckster can meaningfully be taken as the name of that class of character, and on the other hand, how often do you think the Star Wars fandom is forced to debate what the name of a memorable character is? Maybe it does happen. If it does, then like genuinely tell me, I would love to hear about it. But in the case of Star Wars, maintaining and chronicling the canon is literally like a job title, and has been for years. The Mario series has never been concerned with anything like that, but its fans are, because the series is a mystery on many levels. Games are released where notable characters go unnamed and those names have to be found. Names and concepts will be changed without warning. Entries will contradict each other with abandon. mariowiki, as a result, is almost fighting against the source material just to be able to keep records at all. And in consequence, everyone is left in a shadow. We can't even be certain whether official use of the name Phantamanta was sculpted by fan use of that name, because Nintendo is so infamously opaque. I love the Mario fandom, to be honest. Like, it's insane. It is a truly insane fan base, but it's an insanity that is radiant and captivating. We can be given so little and make so much out of it. In this fan base, there is a seemingly endless volume of curios to explore and discuss and dispute and categorize and comprehend. The series is almost like a solid rock wall that we're just chipping away at, praying for bits of ore to spill out. And honestly, I think that's half the appeal. The Mario fandom is a strange, compelling, and distinct thing. I'm not sure there's anything quite like it. It comes in a shape that flares out like wings and tapers to a point. It emerges out of nowhere, washes over objects such that some vanish and others appear, and splits into smaller and smaller replicas of itself that eventually dissipate. And it's a fandom that I'd like to think understands, perhaps better than any other, that if there is a shadow, there is something casting it. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to check out my channel or my Tumblr at Indigo's Findings. Small curiosities like this are important to me because I love to think about and document and comment on the minutiae of the bizarre world we live in, and the opinions, beliefs, choices, efforts, and unknowns that can sculpt the smallest things we see. This kind of thing is genuinely meaningful to me. Having said that, I have once again put a much more vast, robust, and silly video on hold for the sake of making this one. Oops. Thanks again for watching. See you next time.